March 15, 2026, 4 a.m. Persian Gulf. Iran does the unthinkable. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Naval mines block the vital artery of the global oil supply. Revolutionary Guard speedboats patrol the waters. Coastal missiles are on high alert. Tehran celebrates. They believe they have cornered the world. They believe they have won. They have made a fatal mistake. In Washington, the order is given. A single sentence. Initiate Operation Neptune's Spear. The clock starts ticking. 72 hours. The objective? Not just to reopen the strait. The objective is to wipe the Iranian Navy off the map. In 3 days, 80% of its warships will be at the bottom of the ocean. This is not the story of a battle. It is the story of a systematic execution, a brutal demonstration of power that would redefine naval warfare forever. A master class on the futility of brute force against networked intelligence. A real-time case study on how 21st century warfare is won not with more ships, but with better algorithms. Iranian naval doctrine was built over 40 years on a single idea: area denial. They turned the Persian Gulf into a deadly trap, a cage designed to bleed dry any conventional naval power that dared to enter. The strategy was based on 3 inexpensive but supposedly effective pillars. The first pillar was a wall of thousands of naval mines designed to paralyze supertankers and warships. The second pillar was the swarm, more than 200 Boghammer and Siraj fast boats, armed with machine guns and rockets, designed to overwhelm a ship's defenses with attacks from multiple angles. The third pillar, and perhaps the most dangerous, was the rain, a dense and redundant network of shore-based anti-ship missiles. Hundreds of launchers, both mobile and fixed, hidden in caves and valleys along the coast, armed with missiles such as the Noor, a copy of the Chinese C-802, and the Qadr, with its extended range. To Iranian strategists, this combination was foolproof, a defense in depth that would make any naval approach a suicide mission. They had convinced themselves that quantity possessed a quality of its own. Against this asymmetric strategy, the U.S. Navy did not deploy a single weapon. It deployed a system, a network of total dominance operating simultaneously across 5 dimensions: underground, surface, air, space, and the electromagnetic spectrum. Operation Neptune's Spear was not designed to fight the Iranian Navy. It was designed to dismantle it piece by piece with cold, algorithmic efficiency. Iran built a cage, betting that complexity and numbers would overcome technology. They believed that geography and quantity were invincible assets. The U.S. was about to prove, conclusively and devastatingly, that a cage, no matter how elaborate, is still a cage. And this one was made of paper, a cage they themselves would lock from the inside, with the key on the outside, in the hands of their adversary. Tehran's arrogance was in believing they had built a fortress. In reality, they had built their own aquatic tomb. The first phase of the operation did not begin with an explosion. It began with a whisper. From the depths of the Gulf of Oman, an invisible fleet was unleashed. They were not manned submarines. They were drones. Mark 18, Mod 2, Kingfish unmanned underwater vehicles, UUVs, launched from Virginia-class submarines. Each drone is an autonomous mine hunter equipped with high-resolution synthetic aperture sonar and an AI algorithm trained on millions of examples of naval mines. They did not operate alone. They operated as a coordinated swarm, a school of digital predators connected by an underwater acoustic communication network that was immune to interception. Each drone shared its map of the seabed with the others, creating a unified, real-time image of the battlefield. It was a digital hive mind, hunting in absolute silence. The swarm optimization algorithm divided the mined area into sectors. Each Kingfish patrolled its designated zone, sending out sonar pulses that painted a 3-dimensional image of the seabed. The onboard AI analyzed the data in real time. With 99.7% accuracy, it distinguished a mine from a rock, debris from a threat. When a mine was confirmed, its coordinates were marked. The Kingfish then released a smaller drone, the Barracuda, a mine neutralizer designed for a single purpose. The Barracuda approached the mine and detonated a small charge, creating a pressure wave that triggered the enemy mine in a sympathetic detonation, a controlled explosion to prevent an uncontrolled catastrophe. For 12 hours, the silent ballet continued. Hundreds of mines were detected. Hundreds of mines were neutralized, without a single American sailor at risk. While the Iranian admirals in Bandar Abbas looked at their maps, confident in their steel wall, the wall was being systematically eroded from below. By the end of the first 24 hours, a 10-kilometer-wide safe corridor had been opened through the minefield. The first pillar of the Iranian defense had collapsed, and they didn't even know it. Iranian confidence, their most important asset, was being quietly eroded, bit by bit, mine by mine. Every underwater detonation was a nail in the coffin of Iran's area denial doctrine, a coffin they had built themselves, and the American drones were merely hammering in the final nail. The first phase was not a battle. It was an infestation of artificial intelligence that devoured the backbone of Iran's defense before a single shot was fired. With the safe corridor established, the USS Gerald R. Ford and its battle group advanced. It was the bait, and Iran took the bait. At dawn on the second day, the swarm was unleashed. More than 150 IRGC speedboats emerged from hidden ports along the Iranian coast, advancing at high speed toward the American fleet. It was the tactic they had trained for decades. It was every naval commander's nightmare, but the U.S. Navy was ready. The response came in 3 waves of annihilation. The first layer was aerial. MH-60R Seahawk helicopters, the swarm hunters, took off from the destroyers. Each helicopter, armed with Hellfire missiles and laser-guided APKWS rockets, was a floating platform of death. They dove onto the speedboats, turning the fiberglass boats into balls of fire with ruthless precision. The second wave was surface-based. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, with their 5-inch Mark 45 guns and Phalanx CYWS systems, created a wall of steel and fire. The Phalanx, nicknamed R2D2 for its appearance, fired 4,500 tungsten projectiles per minute, shredding anything that came near. But the third layer was the most devastating, and it was completely invisible. It was the AN/SLQ-32 V7 electronic warfare system, nicknamed Mjolnir. The moment the swarm approached, Mjolnir was activated. It didn't just block Iranian communication, it hijacked them. Using packet injection and network spoofing, it turned the swarm's command and control network into a chaos accelerator. Contradictory commands were sent. GPS displayed false positions. Some speedboats turned to attack one another. Others stopped completely. Their engines mysteriously shut off. The swarm, the Iranian Navy's greatest threat, disintegrated into a jumble of isolated and helpless targets, which were then hunted down and destroyed one by one. In less than 2 hours, the second pillar of Iran's defense had been broken. The swarm, the embodiment of Iran's asymmetric warfare strategy, the terror of naval planners for 2 decades, was dismantled and annihilated in less than 2 hours. The illusion that a large number of small threats could overwhelm a superior system was exposed as a deadly fallacy. The swarm was not a many-headed hydra. It was a single entity with a single vulnerability. Its dependence on a centralized command network. For the speedboat crews, it was hell. Their radios screamed with static and ghostly voices. Their GPS showed them in the middle of the desert. The chaos was total. Coordination, the swarm's only advantage, evaporated, and the U.S. crushed that vulnerability with an electronic hammer, turning Iran's greatest strength into its greatest weakness in a matter of minutes. It wasn't a battle, it was neurosurgery, removing the swarm's nervous system before dissecting its body. With the mines neutralized and the swarm destroyed, only the third and final pillar remained, the barrage of coastal missiles. Iran still believed it could inflict pain. They still believed their coastline was a fortress. They were wrong. The final phase of Operation Neptune's Spear was a brutal demonstration of air and electronic dominance. F-35C fighters, operating from the USS Gerald R. Ford, penetrated Iranian airspace. They were were invisible to Iranian radars, but they could see everything. Their advanced sensors mapped every radar emission along the coast. Every antenna that activated to search for targets was, in fact, signing its own death warrant. The F-35s triangulated the exact position of the radars and transmitted the data to F/A 18 Super Hornet fighters coming in close behind. The Super Hornets launched HARM, high-speed anti-radiation missiles, weapons designed to track the radar beam directly back to its source. The antennas that were the eyes of Iran's defense system became beacons for their own destruction. Once blinded, the missile launch sites were next. The F/A-18S, using GPS-guided JDAM bombs, systematically destroyed every launcher, every ammunition depot, every command center. Within 30 minutes, Iran's ability to threaten navigation in the Persian Gulf was eradicated. It was then that the message was sent in Farsi across all remaining Iranian naval communication channels: return to your ports or you will be destroyed. For Admiral Tangsiri, the veteran commander of the IRGC Navy, the message was clear. His decades-long strategy had become irrelevant in less than 72 hours. The surviving Iranian fleet, about 20% of the total, retreated in humiliation, escorted by American drones that broadcast the images live to the world. The surrender was not signed on a ship with pens and paper. It was imposed from the sky with data and radio waves and sealed with the terrifying silence of a combat force that had simply ceased to exist. Iran was not asked to surrender. Surrender was the only logical option left on a battlefield where they could no longer fight, could no longer communicate, and could no longer hide. It was a surrender imposed by the mathematics of imminent annihilation. What happened in the Persian Gulf between March 15th and 18th, 2026, was not a battle. It was an execution, a cold and methodical demonstration that, in modern warfare, a collection of low-tech weapons, no matter how numerous, cannot compete with a fully integrated system of systems. The United States has achieved total dominance across all 5 dimensions of warfare: underwater with its mine-hunting drones, on the surface with its warships, in the air with its fighter jets, in space with its surveillance satellites, and, most importantly, in the electromagnetic spectrum with its electronic warfare. The lesson for other nations, especially China with its ambitions in the South China Sea, is terrifying. The area denial strategy, the A2/AD bubble that has become the centerpiece of Chinese military planning, may not be the fortress they imagine. It may be nothing more than a paper cage, waiting to be dismantled by an adversary that controls the flow of information. Operation Neptune Spear proved that freedom of navigation is not a request. It is a reality imposed by force, if necessary. Iran learned this lesson the hard way. 80% of its fleet at the bottom of the Persian Gulf is a silent, rusted testament to that fact. 21st century warfare is not about who has more ships. It is about who controls the network. And for 72 hours in the Persian Gulf, there was no doubt who was in control. The U.S. Navy did not merely defeat Iran. It rendered it irrelevant, turning its greatest stronghold into a shooting range. The message sent was not just to Tehran, but to the entire world. In the information age, dominance is not merely conquered, it is programmed. And the Pentagon had just released Naval Annihilation Software version 1.0. Software that is available for use in any theater of operation, at any time. The question for the rest of the world is not if it will be used again, but where and when.